You sound exactly like a monkey." The words cracked across the air like a slap bright, cruel, echoing against the glass walls of Meridian Airways check-in. The woman who said it, a blonde in a crisp sky blue uniform, laughed loud enough for the entire line to hear. Her name tag caught the overhead light like it was proud of her. Passengers turned. Some frowned. Most froze. And the woman she mocked, Dr. Danielle Brooks, standing in a golden blazer with her hands folded over a black briefcase, did not move. She blinked once, slow and deliberate, as if weighing whether this moment deserved her energy. If that sentence made you flinch, stay right here. Because 3 hours from now, the woman being mocked will make a single phone call that erases a $1 billion partnership, and every person laughing at this counter will learn what real power sounds like. It was 9:15 in the morning at JFK Airport. The terminal gleamed like a showroom, silver counters, white tiles, a hum of announcements and rolling suitcases. But all that polish could not hide the rot when Melissa Crane, senior attendant, leaned forward with a smirk that carried centuries. "I just asked a simple question, honey," she said, still smiling. "You do not have to get loud. It is funny, though, that accent. Real funny." The laughter that followed was small but sharp. Danielle's reflection in the glass looked perfectly still, the kind of stillness that came from training, from boardrooms where silence was the loudest weapon. She spoke only once, and her voice was level. "Run my name." Melissa scoffed. "I do not think you are even on this list." Her colleague Chad glanced over the monitor, then at Danielle. "Probably one of those last-minute upgrades," he muttered. "They try this all the time." A mother nearby pulled her child closer. A businessman lowered his phone camera, unsure if this was the kind of scene you film or flee. The security officer shifted his weight, pretending not to hear. The light above flickered a small, nervous pulse in an otherwise perfect space. Danielle's gaze never wavered. She had seen this tone before, in the mortgage office that denied her first loan, in the restaurant where the waiter forgot her order, in the silence that always followed when she reminded them who she was. She breathed in slow, tasting the air-conditioned chill of manufactured courtesy. Melissa leaned even closer, whispering like poison. "Maybe try another airline, sweetheart. You do not sound like first class." The laughter came again, but this time, it hit something harder, the quiet wall of a woman who had nothing left to prove. Danielle reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and tapped once on the screen. No words, no glare. Just one command sent to someone who was already waiting. And somewhere in the upper offices of Meridian Holdings, a notification blinked alive. Protocol 9, standby. The countdown had begun. It was 9:23 in the morning when the airport became a mirror of quiet judgment. The terminal at JFK glowed with a sterile, metallic calm, the kind of light that pretended to be welcoming but hid the cold beneath. The sign above the counter read Meridian Airways, Premium Check-In, letters glowing in a soft blue that looked like trust, but not today. Dr. Danielle Brooks stood beneath that light, her golden blazer catching a faint reflection from the polished floor. She looked like composure itself, shoulders still, breathing even, eyes that had measured boardrooms far colder than this. Around her, movement slowed. The woman behind the counter, Melissa Crane, adjusted her scarf with one hand and whispered something to the young man beside her. He laughed under his breath, the kind of laugh people use when they think they are safe to be cruel. "Next in line," Melissa called, even though Danielle was already standing there. She said it like a challenge, not an invitation. The security officer shifted behind them, his badge reflecting the same artificial light that filled the room. Danielle placed her passport on the counter, her fingers steady. "Brooks, Danielle, business class to London." Melissa scanned the screen without looking at the document. Her smile was polite, but her tone was the kind that could cut through skin. "You said business class?" She tilted her head as if the words were unbelievable. "Are you sure you booked the right ticket?" The man beside her, Chad, leaned closer. "We might need extra verification," he said. "Sometimes the system flags profiles that do not match." Presentation. His eyes flicked to her skin, then back to the monitor. The air changed. Passengers nearby pretended to scroll their phones, but their posture betrayed them. A mother pulled her child a little closer. The young couple behind Danielle stopped whispering. They could all feel the wrongness blooming in the silence. Danielle did not speak. She had learned long ago that power was not always in the volume of your voice, but in the calm between breaths. Her phone vibrated once in her purse, just a single, silent confirmation from the person she had messaged earlier. Protocol 9 was waiting. The fluorescent lights above hummed, a nervous sound in the distance. A cleaning cart rattled across the floor, echoing like a warning bell. A camera near the ceiling swiveled slightly, its red light blinking alive. Melissa crossed her arms. "We had a similar situation last week," she said, voice bright, rehearsed. "Someone tried to use a company card that did not belong to them. We cannot be too careful these days." "You mean you cannot be too careful with people like me?" Danielle replied, her voice quiet, deliberate. Melissa's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" Danielle repeated herself, not louder, but slower. "You heard exactly what I said." Behind them, a few passengers shifted their weight. The man in a gray suit looked up from his tablet. A young woman in a denim jacket began recording discreetly, her phone angled down but the camera light faintly glowing. Chad leaned toward Melissa. "Should we call Roger? He will want to handle this." Melissa nodded. "Yes, call him. Tell him we have a verification issue." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Verification issue. A phrase that sounded procedural but carried the sting of accusation. Danielle's reflection in the counterglass looked calm, but her eyes were focused, unblinking. She could see every detail, the glint of Melissa's ring, the flicker of Chad's nervous laugh, the way the security guard avoided her gaze. She remembered standing in another line 20 years ago, same posture, same silence. Back then, she had been a young consultant at her first firm, mistaken for an assistant and asked to wait outside until the real executive arrives. She had waited, and when she finally walked into that meeting, she bought the company 6 months later. That memory rose and settled behind her eyes like armor. Roger Hale arrived minutes later, his steps quick, his voice already rehearsed. "What seems to be the issue?" Melissa pointed at Danielle's passport. "Possible ID mismatch, sir. The system cannot confirm her booking." Roger frowned at Danielle, his tone dripping with polite doubt. "Ma'am, this area is for verified premium clients. If your documentation is incomplete, we can direct you to standard check-in." Standard. The word was not logistical, it was a weapon. Danielle's eyes met his. "Run my name," she said again. "Do not type it. Say it out loud." Roger hesitated, then read slowly from the passport. "Dr. Danielle Brooks." "Good," she said. "Now try your system again." He tapped a few keys, confusion flickering across his face. The monitor beeped. The light above the counter blinked from blue to amber, then back again. "She is not in the manifest," he said. "The system does not recognize the booking." Danielle tilted her head slightly. "Perhaps your system needs an update." Roger exhaled, forcing a smile that looked more like a mask. "Security will need to verify this manually. Please step aside while we check." The crowd had grown now quiet, watching, waiting for something to break. The camera near the ceiling turned again, capturing every word, every breath. Daniela did not move. "I will wait," she said. Her tone was so calm it unsettled everyone who heard it. Melissa looked suddenly unsure, her earlier laughter dissolving into nervous silence. Roger gestured toward the guard. "Stay with her." The guard nodded, hand resting near his belt but eyes darting away. And in that stillness, the kind that only happens before a storm, the voice over the airport intercom announced softly, "Attention, staff at counter 12. Please report to security immediately." Ugh. The words rippled through the air, and Danielle finally looked up at the sign above her head. Meridian Airways, she almost smiled. The storm had already started. Dr. Danielle Brooks stood exactly where she had been for the last 5 minutes. A column of composure in a sea of quiet chaos. The counterlights cast a sterile glow across her face, washing everything around her in the same cold tone. Behind her, the line of passengers had thickened. A dozen voices murmured, curious but cautious, watching the scene unfold like a drama they could not look away from. The soundscape was strangely symmetrical. The low whir of luggage wheels, the hum of fluorescent lamps, the mechanical click of keyboards. But under it all, there was that other sound, the quiet rustle of bias. It was soft, practiced, and as common in this place as the air itself. Roger Hale, the floor manager, tapped the monitor again, pretending he did not feel the weight of the room. "The system is not recognizing this passenger," he repeated to no one in particular, his voice slipping into the safety of procedure. Melissa stood a few inches away, still trying to mask her discomfort with arrogance. "I told you," she said to him, not even lowering her voice. She probably used someone else's corporate credentials. Happens more than you think. Danielle's expression did not change. She had spent a lifetime perfecting stillness, not the fragile stillness of fear, but the deliberate kind born from power. Her calm was not the absence of emotion, it was the control of it. "May I see your booking confirmation?" Roger asked, stretching each word like it was a test. Danielle opened her briefcase and pulled out a thin leather folder. She placed it on the counter without a word. Inside, the documents were immaculate. Printed itineraries, a corporate letterhead, a confirmation number that gleamed in bold black ink. Roger leaned in, scanning it like a man searching for a lie. "This looks official," he murmured, tone uncertain. "But the name on the account matches mine," Danielle interrupted softly. "You read it yourself." He hesitated, the air tightening between them. "It does, but the system still does not validate the entry." Then perhaps," she said evenly, "the system is what needs validation." The line of passengers behind her shifted again. A young woman whispered something to her partner. A man in a navy jacket shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable." Melissa crossed her arms, her confidence flickering back for a moment. "Ma'am, this area is for verified clients. If you cannot clear the database, you are not authorized to board." Danielle turned her head just enough to meet Melissa's eyes. "You are very confident in that statement." Melissa smirked. "I am confident in the rules." "Good," Danielle said, "because those rules are about to change." Her phone vibrated once more in her purse, a single pulse that could have been mistaken for a heartbeat. She glanced at the screen. One message. "Maya. Protocol 9 confirmed. Monitoring live." Danielle typed one short reply. "Hold position." Then she placed the phone back inside her bag, the movement fluid, deliberate, final. Roger cleared his throat, trying to reclaim authority. "Look, we are just following standard security measures. You must understand." "What I understand," Danielle said, interrupting him again, but still without raising her voice, "is that your standard has a pattern, and I have seen that pattern my entire life." Her words did not come out angry. They came out like evidence. For a moment, the entire counter was silent. Even the keyboard clicks stopped. A few feet away, the young woman in the denim jacket, the same one who had started recording, looked at her phone, then at Danielle. Her name was Lena Chen. She was 24, a freelance travel blogger who had posted about airport discrimination before. Her eyes widened as she read the name on the screen of Danielle's open folder. Meridian Ventures Holdings. She mouthed the words silently, connecting dots. Meridian Airways, Meridian Ventures. The same name. Danielle's silence was no longer just composure, it was presence. It filled the space in a way that made the others shrink without realizing it. Roger gestured for security again. "Officer, please accompany this passenger to the side area." The guard stepped forward, tall but hesitant. "Ma'am, please come with me." Danielle did not move. "Are you detaining me?" "No, ma'am. We just need to confirm some information." "Then I will confirm it right here." Her tone was so steady it sounded like law itself. The guard froze, unsure how to respond. Melissa whispered to Roger, "She is making a scene." Danielle heard it. "No," she said, her gaze fixed on the reflection of the overhead lights in the counterglass. "A scene is when people perform. I do not perform. I expose." The phrase cut through the air like a line from a verdict. Roger's fingers trembled slightly as he reached for the keyboard again. The monitor blinked twice, loading something new. Then his face changed. His voice softened. "This cannot be right." "What is it?" Melissa asked quickly. "The booking was made through Meridian corporate accounts," he said slowly. "The same branch that funds our operations." Melissa frowned. "That is impossible. She cannot—" Danielle lifted her eyes, her voice calm and cool. "Finish the sentence." Roger swallowed hard. "She cannot be the account holder?" Danielle's silence answered for her. The hum of the terminal returned, but it was different now, heavier, uncertain, like the sound of a storm forming just beyond the walls. Lena Chen stopped recording. She did not need more footage. What she had seen was enough. Danielle turned slightly, looking toward the long window where airplanes were taxiing into sunlight. "You wanted verification," she said quietly. "Consider this, the start." And for the first time, Roger Hale, the manager who thought he was in charge, did not reply. He just stood there, staring at the screen that refused to lie for him. Somewhere above them, the ceiling speaker crackled faintly with an announcement. Attention all Meridian Airways staff. Please prepare for system audit. Corporate compliance request initiated. Melissa blinked. What does that mean? Danielle smiled, just enough for the light to catch the edge of her face. It means, she said, someone higher up is watching. And the silence that followed was no longer quiet. It was consequence. The tension in the terminal had shifted from curiosity to unease. The counter, once a stage for mockery, now felt like a courtroom, and everyone in line knew it. The air no longer carried idle chatter or the hum of travel excitement. It carried the quiet pulse of judgment being weighed in real time. Roger Hale kept his eyes on the monitor, pretending to search for an explanation that did not exist. His confidence, once sharp as glass, had dulled into confusion. Melissa Crane still stood behind the counter, but her posture had lost its arrogance. She glanced at Danielle, then at Roger, as if waiting for permission to breathe. Danielle Brooks did not speak. She simply stood there, still as stone, her gaze steady on the faint reflection of herself in the polished counter. Her silence was heavier than any accusation. Finally, Roger broke it. "Ma'am, this must be some kind of technical glitch," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "We are trying to understand what happened, but the system, Danielle interrupted softly, is doing exactly what it was built to do." He looked up, puzzled. "Excuse me?" She met his eyes. "It is built to doubt people who look like me." The words hung there plain, unshouted, but powerful enough to make the guard behind her shift his stance. Melissa tried to recover the illusion of professionalism. "That is not fair, ma'am. We treat everyone equally." Danielle turned her head slowly, her tone calm. "You laughed at my voice and assumed my credentials were fake. Tell me, how is that equal?" The young woman in the denim jacket, Lena Chen, raised her phone again. This time, she was not hiding it. The red light blinked clearly in the corner of the frame. She whispered to the people behind her. She told them the truth. Listen to her. Roger's expression hardened when he saw the camera. "Turn that off," he said. "No," Lena replied. "The world should see this." A few passengers murmured in agreement. Someone near the back said quietly, "Let her talk." Roger's voice rose, desperate. "This is a restricted area. Filming is not allowed." Danielle spoke before Lena could answer. "Let her record. I have nothing to hide." The words landed like a command. Even Roger froze. Melissa whispered sharply, "This is getting out of hand." Danielle turned toward her. "No," she said. "This is accountability. It just feels like chaos to people who have never been questioned." Roger's composure cracked. "All right, that is enough. I am calling airport security." Danielle's response was quiet but cutting. "You already did, and they are standing right there." The security officer shifted, caught in the truth of it. He did not move toward Danielle. He did not move at all. Roger lifted his phone, pretending to call anyway. The line rang, but before anyone could answer, a voice echoed from behind the counter, a man in a gray uniform stepping out from the service hallway. His name tag read Jason Morales, trainee. "Sir," Jason said, holding a tablet in his hands, "I just checked the internal database." Roger turned sharply. "Jason, this is not your concern." Jason's voice shook, but he did not back down. "It is, actually. Her booking is valid. The system verified it 3 minutes ago through the corporate server." Melissa's eyes widened. "That is impossible," Jason continued, louder now, the tremor in his voice replaced by conviction. "It is right here, Danielle Brooks, primary account under Meridian Ventures Holdings." The crowd reacted like a wave hitting glass, gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Roger stepped forward, his tone cold. "Jason, close that file right now. You are overstepping." "I am following procedure," Jason said. "You said to confirm. I confirmed." Danielle looked at him, her expression softening for the first time. "Thank you." Jason nodded once, nervous but resolute. Roger slammed his hand on the counter. "You are suspended, effective immediately. Hand over that tablet." Lena gasped, still filming. "You are punishing him for telling the truth?" Melissa snapped. "Ma'am, please step back. You are interfering." Danielle's voice cut through the argument like steel. "Enough!" Every sound stopped. The crowd went silent again, like the room itself had obeyed her. She turned to Roger. "You just threatened an employee for doing his job. You dismissed my documentation. You mocked my voice. And you tried to erase my name from your system." Roger opened his mouth, but no words came. Danielle continued, "That is not protocol. That is prejudice." The sentence hit like a verdict. A pause stretched long enough to make even the humming lights seem louder. Then, faintly, over the intercom, a new voice broke through. "Attention all staff at Counter 12. Corporate oversight is connecting remotely for live audit. Maintain your positions." Roger froze. "Corporate oversight?" he repeated, his tone hollow. Melissa blinked rapidly, her confidence draining by the second. "What does that mean?" Danielle looked up, her face calm, unreadable. "It means the people who built your system are now watching how you use it." The security officer exhaled quietly, lowering his hand from his belt. Lena stepped closer, holding her phone higher. "You really own this company, do you not?" she whispered. Danielle did not answer. She did not need to. The silence around her had already confessed the truth. Roger looked from the tablet to the camera to Danielle. "We can resolve this privately," he said, voice trembling. "No need to escalate." Danielle's reply was firm. "You escalated it the moment you decided I did not belong." A few passengers clapped softly, unsure if they were allowed to. The sound rippled through the line like the first drops of rain before a storm. Danielle turned toward Jason again. "What happens next, Mr. Morales?" He looked down at his tablet. "Corporate servers are syncing. It says, ownership verification, active." Good, Danielle said, her voice a calm blade. "Then let it finish." And as the screen flickered from blue to white, everyone in that terminal, from the passengers to the staff, realized that what began as humiliation was turning into history. No one laughed anymore. The silence that followed was the kind that lived deep in memory, the kind that did not fade when the noise returned. Everyone in the terminal could feel it. The laughter that had filled the air earlier had evaporated, replaced by something far heavier, awareness. Dr. Danielle Brooks stood exactly where she had started, but the ground beneath her no longer belonged to the same world. The fluorescent lights hummed like electricity caught in a wire too small for its current. Jason Morales, the trainee who had spoken up, clutched his tablet close, as if it were both shield and evidence. Melissa Crane's face had gone pale. Roger Hale's hands hovered uncertainly above the keyboard, as if he could type away the moment. Then Danielle blinked, once, slow and deliberate, and in that blink, she remembered. She was 16 again. The air smelled like chalk dust and rain. The classroom walls were covered in posters of writers she had memorized: Langston Hughes, Maya Angelou, James Baldwin. It was Literature Appreciation Week, the 1 week each semester when students were asked to perform poetry aloud. When it was her turn, she stood, heart pounding but proud, and began reciting "Still I Rise." Her voice shook on the first line, then steadied, rich and full. She remembered the teacher's expression changing not with pride, but with discomfort. When she finished, the room stayed silent until one boy at the back muttered, "You sound weird when you talk like that." The teacher did not correct him. She smiled thinly and said, "Maybe next time you should try reading something that fits your tone better." That night, Danielle went home and sat in her mother's kitchen, replaying the words over and over. Her mother, tall, firm, and beautiful in the way that demanded respect, had said nothing for a long moment. Then she reached over, placed her hand on Danielle's, and said quietly, "Never shrink to fit their comfort." The next day, Danielle went back to school. She read the same poem again, louder this time. No apology, no hesitation. The teacher had not clapped, but she remembered the look of surprise. It was the first time Danielle realized that silence could be defiance, and confidence could be revenge. Now, in this airport, that same silence returned, matured, weaponized, and stronger than any voice raised in anger. Roger's voice pulled her back to the present. "Dr. Brooks," he began, his tone forced calm. "We understand there may have been a misunderstanding, but if you allow us to verify through our secondary process." Danielle interrupted gently. "I have already been verified, Mr. Hale, not by your process, but by your system, the one you were so sure would prove me wrong." He swallowed, his Adam's apple rising and falling like it wanted to escape the conversation. "We just need to make sure everything aligns with our protocol." Oh, her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "It already does. You are just not used to seeing who stands on the other side of your assumptions." Melissa spoke up suddenly, her voice high and thin. "We were only following procedure. It was not personal." Danielle turned her gaze to her. "When you laughed at my voice, Was that procedure too? Melissa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The crowd shifted again. Someone coughed. Another person muttered under their breath, "Unbelievable." Lena Chen's camera was still rolling. The red light glowed like a warning flare. Danielle's phone vibrated again, one small pulse. She opened it discreetly. Maya. Audit feed active. Corporate compliance monitoring all terminals. Do you want confirmation broadcast? Danielle typed back, "No. Let them keep wondering." She slipped the phone back into her purse and straightened her posture. The air around her felt denser, like even the molecules had taken notice. She spoke softly, her voice carrying without effort. "Every time I walk into a room, I measure how much disbelief will meet me. It is the tax we pay for being visible in places that were not built for us. You think today is about a ticket? It is not. It is about who you expect to stand in this line and who you cannot imagine could." Her tone was not angry. It was factual, almost gentle, and that gentleness made it hit harder. Jason Morales looked down, his voice low but full of guilt. "I should have said something sooner. I saw the name the moment she handed over her passport." Danielle met his eyes. "You did say something. That is what matters." Roger took a step back. "Ma'am, perhaps we can handle this away from the public. There is no need to make a scene." Danielle's eyes narrowed slightly. "A scene? No, Mr. Hale. What you call a scene, I call a mirror. And right now, everyone is seeing what they usually look away from." The older man in the navy suit at the back of the line nodded quietly. "She is right," he said. "I have seen this happen before. It just never gets recorded." Lena whispered, "Until now." The sound of her camera shutter clicked once more, crisp and final. Melissa finally looked up from her frozen stance, her voice trembling. "So what now? Are you going to report us?" Danielle paused, considering her words. "Report you?" she repeated slowly. "No, I am going to remember you." Ugh. The sentence hit harder than any threat. It was not vengeance, it was truth. Overhead, the intercom chimed again, softer this time. "Attention Meridian Airways staff. Corporate compliance teams have entered review mode. Please remain at your stations." Roger's face drained of color. "They are actually doing a live audit?" Danielle did not respond. She simply gathered her folder, aligned the edges perfectly, and said quietly, "They should. It is long overdue." "Oh." The murmur in the terminal rose, a mixture of discomfort and awe. The passengers were no longer watching a confrontation. They were witnessing an awakening. Melissa stepped back, her voice barely a whisper. "I did not mean—" Danielle stopped her with a raised hand. "Intent does not erase impact." She turned slightly, looking at Jason. "Stay steady. This is not your storm to weather." "Oh." And as she faced forward again, the hum of the airport shifted not louder, but sharper, focused, like the sound of a fuse burning toward its end. Because somewhere above them, behind layers of glass and authority, Meridian's boardroom screens were now filled with live footage from Counter 12. And for the first time, those who had built the system were watching how it failed. The silence that had once belonged to discomfort now belonged to dread. The ripple of what had happened at Counter 12 was spreading through the entire terminal like an electrical current that no one could switch off. Each minute that passed was a new degree of exposure. Dr. Danielle Brooks did not have to move or raise her voice. Her stillness alone had turned the lobby into a stage where everyone's true face was forced into the light. Melissa Crane stood rigid behind the counter, her hands locked around a stack of boarding passes that had begun to tremble. Roger Hale's jaw clenched as he whispered orders into his earpiece, trying to summon control that no longer existed. Jason Morales, the trainee who had spoken up, kept his eyes fixed on the floor, guilt and relief twisting together in his chest. Across the terminal, people were whispering now, strangers united by outrage and curiosity. "Did you see what happened?" She told them. "They are in trouble." The hum of gossip grew, a living thing that no one could contain. Danielle stood at the center of it all, unmoved. Her golden blazer caught the reflection of the overhead lights, gleaming against the sterile white tiles. Every camera phone pointed toward her like searchlights. Yet, she looked neither proud nor vengeful, only resolute. Roger's voice finally cut through the air. "All right," he said, trying to sound composed. "Everyone, please return to your lines. We will sort this out." But no one moved. A man wearing a business suit and wireless headphones spoke up from the side. "Sort it out? You humiliated her in front of everyone. We all saw it. Roger turned sharply toward him. Sir, this is a private matter. The man laughed dryly. You made it public the second you mocked her. The sentence hit the room like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples reached even the passengers far down the line, where new arrivals were asking what was happening. Melissa tried to regain her composure. Sir, please refrain from interfering. This situation is being handled internally. Danielle's eyes moved to her, steady, unflinching. Internally, she repeated, her tone like a question. That word is convenient. It means silence. It means hidden consequences. Melissa swallowed hard. We just want to de-escalate the situation. Danielle replied evenly, Then stop pretending it began with me. The air around them tightened. Somewhere behind the check-in area, a printer beeped, then fell quiet again. It was the only sound that dared to move. Then a new voice entered the space, smooth, confident, but laced with condescension. A tall man in a tailored gray suit walked forward, badge glinting under the light. Samuel Drake, Senior Operations Director. He was the kind of man who had learned to smile while dismissing people. What seems to be the issue here? He asked, looking straight at Roger but already judging Danielle with a glance. Roger straightened. Sir, there was a booking irregularity. The passenger, Samuel held up a hand. I read the internal alert. I am here to ensure proper decorum. That includes not turning this into a public spectacle. His tone dripped with authority. He turned toward Danielle and gave a tight smile. Dr. Brooks, is it? I assure you this is all a misunderstanding. We will have you verified immediately. Danielle did not move. I have already been verified, she said. Samuel smiled again, thinner this time. Well, let us just make certain everything aligns with protocol. We have to follow due process. Danielle's voice was calm but cutting. I have no problem with process. I have a problem with the people who decide when it applies. The businessman with the headphones nodded. Exactly, he muttered loud enough for others to hear. Samuel's jaw tightened. Please, sir, do not interfere. The businessman folded his arms. Then treat her like a customer, not a suspect. The room grew louder with murmurs of agreement. Someone clapped once, then stopped, when Samuel glared in that direction. He looked back at Danielle. If you will come with me, we can resolve this discreetly. Danielle shook her head slightly. No, you will resolve it right here, in front of the same people who watched it happen. Roger exhaled sharply. This is not productive. Danielle turned toward him. What you call productive, I call convenient. Samuel's patience thinned. Dr. Brooks, with respect, refusing to cooperate, will only complicate matters. Her gaze did not waver. You already complicated it the moment you decided disbelief was standard policy. Melissa whispered, Oh my God, but stopped when Samuel shot her a warning look. Then the intercom above them crackled. The same calm female voice that had announced the audit earlier spoke again, this time slower, more deliberate. Attention all Meridian Airways terminals. Corporate oversight is live. Supervisory staff, remain in current positions. The words froze Samuel mid-step. Roger's face drained of color. Melissa's hand dropped the stack of boarding passes. They scattered across the counter like falling cards. Danielle glanced toward the ceiling speaker, her voice barely above a whisper. Now you will learn what accountability sounds like. Samuel regained his composure quickly. This does not concern you, he told the surrounding passengers. Please, disperse. But it was too late. The crowd was no longer passive. Phones were up, cameras recording. Every whisper became a witness. Jason Morales cleared his throat. Sir, he said to Samuel, corporate oversight has requested full transparency during audit mode. That means no relocation of parties involved. Samuel turned on him. And you are? Junior staff, Jason answered. And the person who checked the system. Her booking is legitimate. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The tension was so tight it could have snapped the air in two. Samuel tried to laugh it off. Young man, you are out of your depth. Jason's hands trembled, but his voice stayed clear. Maybe, but I am not wrong. Danielle's gaze softened again. She said quietly, Courage does not require rank. Samuel ignored her. This conversation is over. Everyone, please step aside. Danielle finally turned to face him directly. Her tone was ice, precise, and deliberate. No, Mr. Drake, This conversation is the beginning. The way she said his name made it sound smaller than the room. The intercom chimed once more, louder this time. System notice. Audit stream connected. All interactions are now being recorded for corporate compliance. Every screen behind the counter flickered simultaneously. The Meridian Airways logo dissolved into a live dashboard of data flight schedules, staff logins, complaint histories, timestamps. A hush swept through the terminal. Danielle took one slow breath. "It begins," she said quietly. And though no one moved, everyone knew something irreversible had just been set in motion. The light from the overhead monitors flickered like nervous eyes, casting a faint blue glow across the faces at counter 12. The air felt dense, charged with the kind of silence that precedes either justice or disaster. Phones were raised everywhere now. Travelers stood still, as if waiting for a verdict. The humiliation that had started with a laugh was now something no one could look away from. Dr. Danielle Brooks remained motionless. Her stillness was not retreat, it was control. She had mastered it years ago, the art of letting chaos reveal its own guilt. Around her, the hum of machinery mixed with murmurs, creating an odd rhythm, like breath being held collectively. Samuel Drake, the senior operations director, took a single step forward. His tone was polite but dripping with authority. "Dr. Brooks, I think it would be best if we moved this conversation to my office. There are too many eyes here." Danielle met his gaze. "That is precisely why we will stay." Roger Hale shifted nervously, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Sir, corporate oversight is live. Anything you say might be recorded." Samuel shot him a look that silenced him instantly. "Then we will give them something worth recording," he said, before turning back to Danielle. "You seem to be enjoying this attention." Danielle did not flinch. Attention is not the same as accountability. One fades, the other remains. The crowd murmured softly, the sound like an echo of agreement. Melissa tried to compose herself, adjusting her scarf, but her hands were shaking. "Sir, we are losing control of the terminal." Samuel straightened his tie, his pride unshaken. "We are not losing control, we are reasserting it." He turned toward Jason Morales, who stood half-hidden behind the counter, still clutching the company tablet. "You," Samuel said sharply, "hand over that device. Immediately." Jason hesitated. Corporate compliance said all data stays visible during audit mode. That was a directive to senior staff," Samuel snapped. "Not interns who do not understand confidentiality." Jason's throat tightened. "I understand integrity." The sentence hit harder than anyone expected. Melissa's eyes darted toward Roger, whose jaw tightened in quiet fury. The passengers heard it too, and several of them murmured approval. Samuel's face darkened. "Son, this is not your battle." Jason looked directly at Danielle. "It is if I stay silent while someone is mistreated." Danielle's voice came calm, steady. "You are right, Mr. Morales. Silence is always participation." Samuel turned back to her, his composure cracking. "You have no idea what kind of damage you are causing. This situation affects more than just your pride." Danielle tilted her head slightly. "You are correct. It affects your company's integrity, your hiring policies, your reputation, and the billion-dollar partnership your superiors are about to lose." A ripple of shock went through the line. Even Roger looked up at that. "What partnership?" Danielle's answer was soft but deliberate. "The one I was scheduled to finalize in London this evening." Melissa's lips parted in disbelief. You are the client?" Danielle's tone stayed cold, unwavering. "No, I am the investor." The words landed like thunder. The room changed shape. Every person there, employee or traveler, suddenly saw her differently. Not as a passenger, not as a woman to be managed, but as a mirror, reflecting everything they had refused to see. Samuel blinked slowly, his voice dropping. "You expect me to believe that?" Danielle's response was almost a whisper. "I do not need you to believe it. I only need you to remember it." At that exact moment, the intercom chimed again, 2 tones this time. "Attention Meridian staff. Corporate review in progress. Audit log connection confirmed at counter 12. Every monitor behind the counter changed again. The Meridian Airways logo dissolved into a new display. Compliance stream. Active recording. Samuel's jaw clenched. "Turn that off," Roger whispered. "We cannot. It is coming directly from headquarters." Melissa stepped backward, pale. "They can see us?" Jason answered before anyone else could. "They can hear you too." The realization spread through the staff like a cold wind. For the first time, Samuel's posture faltered. He looked around at the staring faces, the raised phones, the cameras catching every twitch of discomfort. Danielle finally spoke again, quiet and deliberate. You wanted to move this somewhere private. Now it is exactly where it belongs in the light. Samuel tried to respond, but his voice betrayed him. Dr. Brooks, let us be reasonable. I am being reasonable, she said. You, on the other hand, are being recorded. Her words landed like a strike. Even the guard standing nearby hid a faint smile. Then, from across the hall, a voice called out. I saw what happened. A woman in a navy coat stepped forward, clutching her phone. I was filming earlier when the staff mocked her accent. Samuel's eyes widened. Ma'am, please do not interfere. But she ignored him, addressing Danielle instead. Do you want me to send this to someone? I can post it right now. Danielle shook her head calmly. Not yet. Truth does not need to be shouted. It just needs to be seen. The woman nodded and lowered her phone, her expression fierce with respect. The silence that followed felt different now, not fear, not anger, but alignment. Even the air seemed to stand behind Danielle. Roger's phone buzzed. He glanced down and his face turned white. Sir, he said to Samuel, it is headquarters. They are requesting immediate statements from all staff involved. Samuel exhaled, his voice cracking for the first time. Already? Yes. They said it is urgent. Melissa whispered, What do we do? Danielle answered before anyone else could. You listen. Then she turned toward Jason. Mr. Morales, keep the stream active. The truth has waited long enough. Jason nodded, his hand steady now. The intercom chimed again, one final time, the voice colder and more official than before. Meridian Airways, audit confirmation live. All staff are now under review. Samuel looked up at the speaker, then back at Danielle. Who are you really? Her eyes met his. The reason you are finally being held accountable. No one in that terminal moved. The storm was no longer coming, it was already here. The sound of the intercom still echoed faintly in the air, even after the voice had gone silent. It was the sound of inevitability the moment everyone realized that the story unfolding at Counter 12 was no longer in their control. Every eye in the terminal was drawn to that one spot where the golden light hit Dr. Danielle Brooks, illuminating her like the calm center of a storm that no one could escape. Phones were still raised. The crowd had grown larger, travelers abandoning other lines to see what had paralyzed Meridian Airways' most polished counter. Employees from nearby gates stood frozen, whispering into headsets, pretending to work while secretly watching. The smell of coffee from the nearby cafe mixed with tension so sharp it was almost visible. Melissa Crane stood trembling behind the counter, her once confident smile now replaced with the pallor of guilt. Roger Hale's hands hovered over his keyboard, but he did not dare type anything. Jason Morales stood slightly off to the side, eyes darting between the screen and Danielle, waiting for direction. Samuel Drake, the senior operations director, finally broke the silence. Dr. Brooks, he began, his voice attempting to recover authority. Our corporate office will handle this matter. For now, I must insist that you allow us to de-escalate the situation and protect our staff. Danielle looked at him, her face composed but unreadable. Protect your staff? She repeated slowly, her voice measured. From what, Mr. Drake? From the truth? The crowd murmured again, a low wave of reaction rolling through the air. Samuel cleared his throat, forcing civility back into his tone. From reputational harm. We all make mistakes, and I am sure we can resolve this with understanding. Danielle's eyes narrowed slightly. Understanding requires accountability. You are asking for forgiveness without confession. The man's smile tightened. That is not what I said. No, Danielle replied, but it is what you meant. Jason Morales glanced at his screen again, frowning. Sir, he said to Samuel, corporate oversight has just sent another command. The stream is being archived in real time. They have also requested that all staff involved remain in frame. Samuel stiffened. That is absurd. Roger Hale's voice trembled as he said, They can see everything we do. It says active camera monitoring. Melissa backed away from the counter. They are watching us right now? Danielle's tone was calm, almost gentle. Yes, and they should be. For the first time, the weight of those words truly landed. The employees looked around as if the air itself had turned into glass. The The realization that they were being watched by the same company that had taught them to smile through discrimination was too much to hide behind professionalism. Samuel tried to salvage his composure. "We will cooperate fully with the investigation," he said. "But this public spectacle is unnecessary." Danielle took one step closer, her voice steady. "You called it a spectacle because it is no longer yours to script. This is what happens when the people who are always watched finally get to watch back." The murmurs grew again. Someone clapped once, quietly, and others followed hesitant, unsure if they were allowed. The applause grew into a scattered rhythm of agreement before falling back into silence. Samuel's patience snapped. "Enough," he said sharply. "This is not a courtroom." Danielle's reply came instantly. "No, Mr. Drake. It is worse for you. Courtrooms have walls. This one has an audience." The silence that followed was electric. The intercom chimed again. "Attention Meridian Airways staff. Corporate compliance requests written statements from employees involved at Counter 12. Deadline. Immediate." Melissa gasped. "They want statements right now?" Roger whispered. "This is a full-scale audit. I have never seen them do it live." Jason exhaled, almost to himself. "They are not auditing the system. They are auditing behavior." Danielle turned her head slightly, her voice low. "Precisely." She looked around, letting her eyes rest briefly on each person who had stood against her. Melissa, Roger, Samuel. Each of them avoided her gaze. Then she turned toward the crowd. "You all saw what happened," she said. "You heard the words that started this. You saw the disbelief, the laughter, the way their system conveniently malfunctioned the moment my face did not match their expectation." And a woman in the crowd nodded slowly. "We did," Danielle continued, her voice rising just enough to carry. "This is not new. It is simply recorded now, and for once, the burden of proof does not sit on my shoulders." Samuel raised his hand as if to silence her. "Dr. Brooks, please. This grandstanding will not change what happened." Danielle's eyes fixed on him. "It already has. You are no longer in charge of the narrative." The words were surgical, precise. Samuel's lips parted, but no defense came out. Jason looked at his screen again and spoke, voice hushed but clear. "Corporate has activated voice capture." Melissa's panic cracked through her facade. "They can hear us too?" "Yes," Jason replied. "Everything." Danielle's voice softened. "Then I will speak clearly." She faced the nearest camera above the counter and said, "This is what systemic discrimination looks like when it wears a uniform and smiles for the customer. You built policies to protect your brand, not your people. Today, that ends." The crowd erupted, some gasped, some applauded, and others simply stared, absorbing every word like confession. Samuel looked toward Roger. "Shut it down," he hissed. Roger shook his head helplessly. "We cannot. The override is remote. They are controlling everything from headquarters." Samuel's voice rose, desperate. "Then call them, tell them," but the intercom cut him off with a final chime. "Notice, all Meridian Airways terminals are now in compliance lockdown. Staff mobility restricted pending investigation. Please remain in your current locations." Gasps spread through the room. The employees were trapped not by walls, but by consequence. Danielle exhaled slowly, her tone even. "You wanted control, Mr. Drake. Now you have none." He looked at her, his composure finally shattered. "Who are you?" he whispered. Her eyes never left his. "Someone who stopped asking for permission to exist." The words hit like thunder, quiet, but inescapable. Behind her, a screen flickered again. The Meridian logo was gone. In its place appeared a live message in white text against a black background. "Internal review, authorized by Executive Office. Oversight lead, Dr. D. Brooks." Every jaw in that room dropped. Danielle looked up at it, calm as ever. "Now," she said softly, "let us see who really follows protocol." And as the realization spread through the terminal that the woman they had mocked was the one leading the investigation, no one dared to breathe. For a long, charged moment, the only sound in the terminal was the steady hum of the lights above. Even the air seemed to stop moving, as if the building itself were waiting for permission to exhale. On the screens behind Counter 12, the words, "Internal Review, Authorized by Executive Office," glowed in bold white letters. Beneath it, another line scrolled across the bottom. "Oversight Lead, Dr. Danielle Brooks." No one spoke. The hierarchy that had dictated tone and posture for years had shattered in a heartbeat. Every person who had once looked down on Danielle now stood motionless, unsure whether to apologize or run. Melissa Crane's fingers trembled against the counter. Her lipstick, once perfectly painted, had cracked at the corners from the strain of her forced smile. Roger Hale's eyes darted back and forth between the screen and Danielle, his face pale, his confidence stripped away. Even Samuel Drake, the senior operations director, looked hollow now, a man realizing too late that the person he had tried to silence could end his entire career. Danielle stood calm, centered, perfectly still. The golden blazer that had drawn ridicule earlier now looked like armor. The crowd watched her with the reverence reserved for someone who had turned humiliation into justice. Samuel finally broke the silence. "This is impossible," he muttered. "You cannot—" "I can," Danielle interrupted quietly, "because I built the compliance division that is auditing you right now." He stared at her. "You what?" She took one step forward, her tone still calm, unhurried. 3 years ago, Meridian Ventures acquired 41% of Meridian Airways. I personally designed the internal review protocols to ensure no staff member could abuse authority or falsify a client record. Those safeguards are now doing exactly what they were meant to do. Jason Morales blinked, realizing the scale of what she was saying. "You wrote the rules." Danielle's gaze softened slightly. "I did. I just never imagined I would have to use them myself." The crowd murmured again, voices rising and falling like wind against glass. Someone whispered, "She owns part of the company?" Another voice answered, "She owns the rules." Melissa's face crumpled. "I did not know," she said weakly. "I swear, I did not know who you were." Danielle turned toward her. "You did not need to know who I was to treat me with respect." Melissa's mouth opened, then closed again. There was nothing left to say. Samuel regained just enough composure to speak, his tone desperate. "Dr. Brooks, perhaps we can find a reasonable solution. Let us handle this internally, away from the crowd." Danielle shook her head. "No, that is how it stays buried. Today, we stay right here where everyone can see the cost of ignorance." Her phone buzzed once. She glanced at it briefly. "Maya, corporate board monitoring live. Do you wish to assume command?" Danielle typed a short response. "Yes. Proceed with executive override." Within seconds, the screens flickered again. The company logo dissolved into a split-screen feed showing Danielle's name and title beneath the Meridian Ventures emblem. Below it appeared live footage from the terminal, confirming that the audit was being broadcast directly to the board. A collective gasp spread through the space. Every employee knew what that meant. There would be no hiding, no rewriting of reports, no private damage control. Samuel's voice broke through the tension. "Dr. Brooks, you are putting people's livelihoods at risk." Danielle met his eyes, steady and unblinking. "No, Mr. Drake. They put their livelihoods at risk the moment they decided discrimination was company culture." A few passengers clapped softly. The sound grew until it became a wave of applause that rolled through the line. No one told them to stop. Melissa began to cry quietly, whispering through her tears. "I did not mean to hurt anyone. I thought—" Danielle raised a hand gently. "You thought I did not belong. You thought my presence needed proof." She paused. "And now you are learning what proof looks like when it carries consequence." Roger tried to regain some authority. "Dr. Brooks, please. We understand this has gone too far, but there are procedures." "There were procedures when you dismissed my documentation," she said evenly. "There were procedures when you accused me of fraud. You followed none of them. Today, you will." The intercom came alive again, the voice crisp and neutral. "Attention Meridian Airways staff. All terminals entering compliance lock. Please submit digital statements immediately. Failure to comply will result in automatic suspension." Roger's eyes widened. "Automatic suspension?" Jason nodded, reading from his tablet. "It is true. The system just locked their profiles." Samuel took a step forward, voice trembling with forced civility. "Dr. Brooks, at least allow us to explain." Danielle's gaze turned sharp. "You will explain in your written statement, under oath, to the very system that has been recording you for the last 20 minutes. The words struck like lightning. A heavy silence fell again. Even the hum of the lights seemed distant now, drowned out by the weight of consequence. Jason looked at Danielle, his voice careful but full of respect. "Dr. Brooks, the boardroom is confirming acknowledgement of your executive command. Do you wish to terminate the London contract? Danielle paused, her expression unreadable. Not yet, she said softly. Let them finish revealing themselves first. Melissa wiped her tears. You are enjoying this, are you not? She said bitterly. Danielle turned to her slowly. Enjoying it? No. But I am remembering it. Every word, every laugh, every doubt. Because memory is how justice begins. The crowd fell completely silent again. No one dared interrupt. Then, faintly, a child's voice broke the tension, a little girl near the back, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, why are they all scared of her? Her mother crouched beside her, eyes never leaving Danielle. Because, she said quietly, they just realized who they tried to embarrass. Danielle heard it. She looked toward the child and gave the smallest nod, a gesture that said everything without needing words. Above them, the audit feed continued to glow. The clock on the screen ticked forward, marking each second that truth remained visible. For the first time that morning, Danielle allowed herself to breathe deeply. The weight she had carried, the years of endurance, the silent moments swallowed in boardrooms and airports felt lighter. Justice, she thought, was never loud. It was patient. And today, patience was finally being heard. The crowd around Counter 12 had grown so large that airport security began to rope off the area, though none of them dared approach Dr. Danielle Brooks. Every agent in sight wore the same expression, a mix of uncertainty and fear, because it was no longer clear who held authority here. The usual hierarchy of uniforms and titles had evaporated, replaced by one undeniable truth glowing across every screen. Oversight lead. Dr. Danielle Brooks' executive command active. No one needed further explanation. The woman they had laughed at, doubted, and humiliated was now the highest-ranking presence in the building. The atmosphere was heavy, pulsing with the strange tension that comes when justice begins to shift the air itself. It was not loud. It was not violent. It was exact. Samuel Drake stood frozen beside the counter, his carefully constructed composure falling apart piece by piece. Roger Hale, the manager who had called for security, now kept his hands clasped tightly behind his back, as if holding them there could keep the situation from unraveling further. Melissa Crane had stopped speaking entirely. Her eyes were red, but her silence was not remorse, it was terror. Danielle Brooks, meanwhile, remained perfectly still. Every movement she made carried intent, as if even the act of breathing was part of a greater statement. The intercom above them came alive again. Meridian Airways Compliance Division has assumed direct control. All staff under active audit are instructed to remain at their stations until review completion. Jason Morales, the young trainee, looked up from his tablet. Dr. Brooks, the board has requested live documentation from the terminal. They want to verify every interaction word for word. Danielle nodded slowly. Then give them every word. Truth should never whisper. Jason's hands moved quickly, forwarding the feed. His reflection in the monitor looked pale but determined. For the first time since this began, he looked like someone proud to stand where he stood. Samuel's voice cut through the quiet. Dr. Brooks, if you insist on continuing this charade, you should know it will have serious consequences. You are jeopardizing the stability of this company. Danielle turned her head slightly, her tone calm. Mr. Drake, instability does not come from truth. It comes from pretending truth does not matter. He exhaled, fighting to regain ground. You are overstepping the boundaries of professionalism. She gave a faint smile. No, I am redefining it. Her gaze shifted to the crowd. Professionalism should never mean submission. It should mean integrity under pressure. If your system cannot tell the difference, then it was never built for justice. The audience absorbed her words in silence. No one dared interrupt. A few people recorded, others simply watched, wide-eyed. Melissa finally spoke again, her voice small. Dr. Brooks, will they fire us? Danielle looked at her, and for a moment her tone softened. I do not know, Miss Crane. But I do know this, the next time you see a black woman standing in front of you, I hope you will see her as more than a problem to verify. Melissa looked down, shame flooding her expression. Samuel turned toward the employees, desperate. Everyone, remain professional. Do not engage further. But the command sounded hollow now, like a fading echo of authority that no one respected anymore. Then, the voice over the intercom changed. This time, It was not the neutral tone of the compliance system. It was human low, steady, commanding. This is Maya Turner, Chief Operations Officer for Meridian Ventures. This communication is being relayed from the executive boardroom. The entire terminal fell silent. Everyone looked up. Maya continued, her voice clear through the speakers. We are aware of the incident occurring at JFK Terminal 4, Counter 12. Dr. Brooks is operating under full executive authority. All staff are to comply with her directives immediately. Failure to do so will be considered a breach of corporate ethics. Samuel's face drained of color. She called the board? Danielle replied evenly, No, they called me. A faint ripple of applause rose again from the onlookers. Maya's voice continued. Effective immediately, we are initiating a full behavioral audit across all Meridian Airways branches. Counter 12 will serve as the model case. Continue the live feed. The announcement ended, and the intercom went silent once more. Jason looked at Danielle, astonished. You just made this a national review. Danielle met his gaze. Good. The lesson should never stay local. Samuel's composure snapped. Do you realize the damage you are doing to this brand? The media will destroy us. Danielle turned fully toward him, her eyes sharp but calm. The media cannot destroy what truth has already exposed. You do not fix rot by hiding it. You fix it by tearing out what decays. Roger swallowed hard. Dr. Brooks, if I could just say... She cut him off gently. No, Mr. Hale. You have said enough. Every word you spoke before this moment is already archived. He looked down, silent. Melissa spoke again, tears slipping down her cheeks. I am sorry, she said quietly. I really am. Danielle nodded once. Then learn from it. Do not say it for me. Say it for the next woman who looks like me. The terminal was utterly still. Every voice, every sound, even the rolling of luggage had stopped. The light above the counter shifted slightly, a warmer hue now, softer, almost golden. It framed Danielle in a glow that felt less like vengeance and more like vindication. Jason's voice broke the quiet. Dr. Brooks, the audit file is complete. The system has automatically logged your statements and the staff responses. The board has acknowledged receipt. Good, Danielle said. Let them keep watching. She turned back toward Samuel. You called me a disruption. But disruption is what happens when truth finally refuses to sit quietly. Samuel stared at her, words trapped behind the weight of his own silence. Danielle continued, her tone steady, her diction deliberate. You wanted this moment to disappear into routine, to file it under misunderstanding. But this is no misunderstanding. This is a pattern one that ends today. The words hung in the air like the final line of a verdict. Maya's voice returned over the intercom once more, quiet but firm. Thank you, Dr. Brooks. Headquarters has confirmed full compliance. Continue with your discretion. Danielle exhaled slowly, then turned back toward the crowd. Her eyes softened as they met the faces of those who had stood silently but watched with hope. Sometimes, she said quietly, justice does not arrive with noise or applause. Sometimes, it simply stands its ground until the world has no choice but to recognize it. No one spoke. No one moved. In that silence, every person at Counter 12 understood that the humiliation that began as mockery had now transformed into reckoning. And in that reckoning, power had finally changed hands, not through anger, but through truth spoken without fear. The silence that followed Maya Turner's voice was so deep it seemed to absorb sound itself. Even the soft rumble of airplane engines outside the glass walls faded into something distant and unreal. The world inside Terminal 4 had narrowed to a single-point Counter 12, and at the center of it stood Dr. Danielle Brooks. The golden light from the terminal ceiling caught the faint shimmer in her hair, but her eyes remained fixed on the reflection of the screen before her. The words, Executive Command Active, glowed above her name like a silent verdict. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly. This was the first time in hours that Danielle allowed herself stillness without defense. Her fingers rested on the edge of the counter, steady but not clenched. Her posture was immaculate, her breathing measured. Yet beneath that calm was something electric, the quiet pulse of thought, of memory, of control, reclaiming its rightful place. Jason Morales stood a few feet away, still clutching the tablet. His eyes flicked from Danielle to the security team that had remained frozen by the glass doors. Even they looked uncertain about what authority meant now. Roger Hale's face was pale, the sweat on his temples catching the fluorescent light. Melissa Crane's mascara had streaked down her cheeks, but she kept her gaze fixed downward, as if afraid that eye contact alone might trigger another revelation. Samuel Drake broke the silence first. His voice was lower now, the edge of authority stripped away. "Dr. Brooks," he said quietly, "if you choose to continue this, you should know that every word is being recorded by the board. They will see your anger as unprofessional." Danielle looked up slowly. "Mr. Drake," she said, her tone quiet but deliberate. "What you call anger is not emotion. It is endurance, finally speaking." He tried again, desperate for control. "You are not helping your cause by humiliating your own employees." Danielle's voice cut like silk. "I am not humiliating anyone. I am illuminating them. There is a difference." The words were soft, but the silence that followed made them echo like thunder. Jason Morales swallowed hard. "Dr. Brooks," he said gently, "the board has requested that we maintain the live feed for transparency. Would you like to address them?" For a moment, Danielle said nothing. Her gaze drifted toward the ceiling camera, the small red light blinking steadily above the counter. It reminded her of a heartbeat mechanical, constant, unemotional. She straightened her posture slightly. "They have seen enough," she said softly, "but they should also understand the silence that came before this moment." "Iston," Jason hesitated. "Silence?" Danielle nodded. "The silence we live through before people believe us. The silence of rooms that turn to noise only when we stop accepting it." Her words were not for the staff anymore. They were for every unseen ear listening on the other side of the feed. Samuel folded his arms, his voice brittle. "You are turning this into theater." Danielle met his eyes. "Theater?" she repeated quietly. "No, Mr. Drake. This is what truth looks like when it finally finds a microphone." The line landed heavy and perfect. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Amen," and others nodded. The sound was small but alive. Danielle's gaze softened for a moment as she looked around the terminal. The faces she saw, strangers, travelers, employees, were mirrors of disbelief, slowly becoming respect. And beneath that respect, something more important was forming: recognition. Her calm began to shift into reflection. The air seemed to pull memory forward, uninvited but welcome. She remembered sitting in a conference room years ago, surrounded by men who spoke over her ideas, rephrasing her words as if they had invented them. She had stayed quiet then, not because she lacked voice, but because she was learning. She had been taking notes on the anatomy of arrogance. That silence had not been surrender, it had been strategy. Now, as she stood in this airport, the strategy had matured into mastery. Roger Hale broke in timidly, his voice barely audible. "Dr. Brooks, I wanted to say I am sorry. We were wrong." Danielle looked at him without hostility, only precision. "Yes, Mr. Hale, you were, but apology does not rewrite behavior. It only begins the sentence that must follow it." Melissa wiped her eyes. "I will lose my job for this," she whispered. Danielle's response came gently. "Then let it teach you something that no paycheck ever could." The hum of the terminal deepened. Passengers shifted, waiting for what would come next. The energy in the room was not chaos anymore, it was balance returning. Jason looked at his tablet again. "Dr. Brooks, the board has issued acknowledgement of the audit. They have authorized you to determine immediate corrective action." Danielle exhaled once, the breath slow and heavy with meaning. "Then we begin with truth." She looked toward the camera, her tone now formal, like the start of a closing statement. "This is not about one counter, one mistake, or one moment of bias. It is about the quiet architecture of disbelief, the design that says worth must prove itself. I am not here for revenge. I am here for reconstruction." Samuel's voice cracked. "You cannot rebuild trust by destroying us." Danielle's eyes turned toward him. "Trust does not need your permission to begin again. It only needs to stop being a lie." The line struck deep. Even he looked away. For the first time, Danielle's expression softened completely. "I did not come here today expecting this," she said, her tone quieter now. "I came to board a flight, to do my job, to represent my company. But life has a way of reminding us. Dignity is not something you ask for. It is something you reclaim." Jason's voice was low, reverent. "Dr. Brooks, should I end the broadcast?" Danielle considered it. Then she shook her head slowly. "No. Let them see what quiet power looks like." Let them understand that control is not loud. It breathes, it waits, and when it arrives, it does not need applause. The crowd remained completely still, listening as if to a sermon. Melissa whispered through her tears, "You are not what I thought you were." Danielle gave a faint, knowing smile. "That is the point, Miss Crane. I never am." The intercom chimed softly once more, not an order, not an alarm, just the sound of acknowledgement. Compliance update complete. Count to 12 under executive supervision. Danielle looked toward the crowd one last time before turning back to the counter. "Now," she said quietly, "let us see if accountability can fly as high as our planes claim to." And as her words faded, so did the last tremor of fear in the room. Silence remained not heavy anymore, but earned. The minutes after the broadcast confirmation passed like a held breath. The air inside Terminal 4 was thick with an almost sacred stillness, a silence too full to be empty. The crowd had stopped whispering. Every person who had been watching now stood in the quiet awe of consequence. Even the hum of the escalator at the far end of the terminal seemed softer, as if the machinery itself understood that something important was happening. Dr. Danielle Brooks stood at the counter, her reflection caught in the glossy surface before her. Her phone buzzed once in her purse, not with panic, not with noise, but with control. She reached for it slowly, her movements deliberate, every motion measured as though the air around her were an audience. She answered without hesitation. "Maya," she said softly. Her assistant's voice came through clear and composed, the sound of calm precision. "Protocol 9 is fully active. Legal and communications teams are on standby. Do you wish to move forward with the directive?" Danielle's gaze stayed fixed on the terminal windows where planes glided across the morning sky. "Yes," she said. "Activate Protocol 6. Maya's voice held a subtle surprise. "6? You are certain?" Danielle's tone never wavered. "Completely. Send the directive to Meridian Ventures' New York office and notify the London team. The deal is suspended effective immediately." A pause followed, then Maya's quiet confirmation. "Understood. Executing now." Danielle ended the call and slipped the phone back into her purse, her expression unreadable. Around her, no one moved. But those who had overheard her final words, "The deal is suspended," began to whisper in disbelief. Roger Hale blinked as if trying to process the meaning. You are canceling a corporate deal?" he stammered. Danielle looked at him with the calm certainty of someone who had already made peace with the storm her decision would cause. "No, Mr. Hale, I am canceling validation that does not deserve my company's money." Jason Morales' eyes widened. "You just pulled the plug on a $1 billion partnership." Danielle's reply came quietly, almost as if she were thinking aloud. "Money is replaceable. Integrity is not." Her words settled in the air like gravity. Samuel Drake's voice cracked as he tried to regain some authority. "You cannot just cancel a deal of that magnitude. There are contracts, procedures, international stakeholders." Danielle interrupted him with a glance that stopped him mid-sentence. "You built an entire infrastructure of procedure to protect arrogance," she said evenly. "You forgot to protect respect." Melissa Crane's voice came out as a whisper. "You are serious. You really are ending it." Danielle nodded once. "When an environment refuses to evolve, you do not negotiate with it. You walk away and build better." For a moment, no one knew how to respond. The truth of what she had said was too large, too simple to argue with. The security guards standing by the rope barriers exchanged glances but said nothing. The crowd's silence was no longer fearful. It was reverent. Jason checked the tablet again. "Dr. Brooks, confirmation just came through. Meridian Ventures has frozen the London account. The cancellation order was received by the partners' board less than a minute ago." Roger exhaled sharply. "You are going to bankrupt them." Danielle's tone did not rise, but its weight filled the room. "I am going to remind them that access is not entitlement. You do not get to mock my identity and profit from my silence." Samuel took a step forward, his desperation spilling through his carefully managed facade. "Dr. Brooks, please think about what you are doing. Thousands of people depend on this partnership, entire teams." Danielle turned toward him, her gaze firm but not cruel. "Do you know what people like me depend on, Mr. Drake? The grace to exist without being mistaken for less. The strength to stay calm while being doubted. The right to walk into any room without having to audition for dignity. That is what we depend on." The crowd murmured in agreement. Someone said softly, "Tell it, sister." Another voice echoed, "She is right." Melissa's tears had dried, leaving faint streaks on her cheeks. She looked at Danielle with something like regret or maybe recognition. "Dr. Brooks," she whispered, "what happens to us now?" Danielle's tone remained even. "You will face whatever accountability your actions earn, but if you learn, truly learn, then maybe you will understand that every system is built by people and therefore it can be rebuilt by them too." The intercom above them chimed again. The voice was digital this time, stripped of warmth. "Attention, Meridian Ventures directive received. Partnership suspension confirmed. Compliance record updated under Protocol 6. The announcement echoed across the entire terminal. Travelers far down the corridor stopped walking, drawn by the sound of authority that carried more weight than any boarding call. Samuel turned back to Danielle, his expression caught between disbelief and awe. "You really planned for this, did you not? You set this up." Danielle looked at him, her expression calm but cold. "I planned for fairness. What you mistook for coincidence was preparation." Roger swallowed hard. "What happens now?" Danielle's answer came quietly. "Now, we witness consequence." Jason read another line from the tablet, his voice almost reverent. "Dr. Brooks, headquarters is asking if you wish to log an executive statement for the press release." "Oh." Danielle turned slightly toward the cameras above them. Her voice softened, but every syllable carried precision. "No statement. The footage is the statement." The crowd reacted with a ripple of nods and murmured approval. There was no need for slogans, no need for performance. The truth had already gone viral before anyone posted it. Samuel pressed one last argument, his voice trembling. "You are destroying years of progress." Danielle's eyes met his, calm and unwavering. "Progress that ignores people is not progress. It is branding." A long silence followed. Then, slowly, passengers began to applaud, not loud at first, but steady, rhythmic. It spread down the line, through the waiting area, across the floor of Terminal 4. Each clap landed like a heartbeat. Danielle did not smile. She simply closed her eyes for one brief second, letting the sound wash over her not as triumph, but as confirmation. When she opened them again, she said quietly, "Justice does not announce itself. It just waits for you to stop apologizing for deserving it." And for the first time that morning, the light in the terminal felt warm. It did not glare. It embraced. The echo of applause filled the air like forgiveness, finally learning how to speak. The terminal had become a cathedral of silence once again. The applause faded slowly, leaving behind an air that felt sacred not because anyone prayed, but because everyone had witnessed a truth too undeniable to ignore. The blue-white lights above Counter 12 glowed softer now, as if the building itself had taken a breath of relief. Dr. Danielle Brooks remained motionless, her hands resting lightly on the counter's edge. She was calm, but there was an unmistakable current beneath that calm, the steady hum of power that did not need volume to be felt. Her golden blazer caught the light like a reflection of control itself. Jason Morales still stood nearby, eyes fixed on the tablet that connected them to Meridian Ventures headquarters. Every few seconds, new messages appeared, updates, confirmations, acknowledgments from the board. He scrolled carefully, his hands steady now, his fear replaced by something else entirely, respect. Samuel Drake, however, had not accepted the loss. His pride, stripped bare, clung to its last refuge denial. He stepped forward slowly, the polished soles of his shoes clicking against the tile floor. "Dr. Brooks," he began, his voice low but sharp, "I do not believe this is the proper venue to continue this performance." Danielle's eyes moved toward him, slow and deliberate. "Performance?" she repeated, her voice quiet but so precise that it cut through the air like a blade. "Mr. Drake, the only performance here was the one you mistook for professionalism, the rehearsed politeness that hides prejudice." Samuel swallowed, trying to recover. "You have made your point. There is no need to continue humiliating people." Danielle's tone stayed even. "I did not humiliate anyone. The truth did that. I simply stopped protecting it from being seen." Melissa Crane shifted behind the counter, whispering under her breath, "She is right." Her voice was faint, but it carried honest and trembling. Samuel shot her a glare. "Quiet." Danielle turned toward him again. "You can silence her voice, Mr. Drake, but you cannot silence what she has learned. The words landed with a weight that made even Roger Hale step back. Jason looked down at the tablet once more, then spoke softly. Dr. Brooks, headquarters has confirmed the suspension order, but there is more. Danielle raised an eyebrow. Continue. Jason hesitated. Meridian Ventures Communications Department reports that the audit feed was mirrored to the Global Compliance Network. That means everyone in our company has seen this. A collective murmur swept through the crowd. Roger's mouth fell open. Melissa covered her lips with her hand. Even Samuel looked shaken, his face drained of color. You mean, Roger began, his voice trembling. Every branch? Every division? Jason nodded. Yes, sir. Every employee across 6 continents. The system synced automatically. Danielle's expression did not change, but her eyes glimmered with something sharp, not satisfaction, but inevitability. Then the lesson has reached its audience, she said softly. Samuel took a step closer, desperation returning. Do you have any idea what you have done? You have made this company look unstable. Danielle's tone stayed calm. No, Mr. Drake. I made it look honest. There is a difference. He ran a hand through his hair, the mask of authority slipping further. Our investors will panic. The press will spin this into something you cannot control. Danielle met his gaze. Good. Let them spin. I do not fear the truth. It is only those who benefit from lies who panic when light arrives. The line silenced him completely. His shoulders sagged, the weight of his arrogance finally visible. Melissa turned toward Danielle, her voice still soft. Dr. Brooks, what happens to us now? Danielle looked at her not with vengeance, but with a deep, measured empathy that was far more powerful. You rebuild. You sit with your discomfort until it teaches you something, and then you do better. That is what accountability looks like. Tears filled Melissa's eyes again, but this time they were not from fear. I do not know if I can. You can, Danielle said simply, because guilt is easy. Growth is the hard part. Choose the hard part. Jason looked up, his voice steady but low. Dr. Brooks, the board has asked for your final statement before they close the audit record. Danielle nodded once, then stepped forward into the soft cone of light cast by the ceiling fixture. Every camera in the room adjusted to her movement. The crowd grew completely still. Her voice, when it came, was calm but resonant like a tide that spoke instead of roared. This is not a story about one person being mistreated. It is the story of how silence becomes structure, how disbelief becomes policy. I have spent my career proving myself in rooms that were already mine, earning respect that should have been free. Today, I stopped performing for permission. She paused, letting the words settle. The sound of someone sniffing softly broke the quiet, then faded again. I do not want revenge, Danielle continued. I want reform. I want the next black woman who walks into this airport to be treated as a client, not a question. I want the people who watch today to remember that professionalism without empathy is just polished cruelty, and I want those who laughed at my voice to know it was never anger they heard. It was power refusing to shrink. Her final words carried through the terminal like the strike of a bell. Even the lights seemed to hum in acknowledgement. When she finished, no one spoke. The silence that followed was not the cold quiet of tension, it was reverence. Jason swallowed hard. Statement logged, he said softly. The board has received it. Danielle nodded. Then we are done here. Samuel's voice broke, small and uncertain. You cannot walk away from this like nothing happened. Danielle looked at him one last time. Mr. Drake, you are right. Nothing happened until now, and that is exactly the problem. She turned, lifting her briefcase from the counter. The sound of the clasp snapping shut echoed like punctuation. As she walked toward the glass doors, the crowd parted instinctively, making room without being told. Every pair of eyes followed her. Every breath waited for hers to lead. She paused once at the threshold, sunlight spilling across her shoulders, and said quietly, almost to herself, let them learn that silence was never weakness. It was patience becoming law. Oh. Then she stepped forward, leaving behind a terminal forever changed a place where prejudice had been caught midair and forced to face its reflection. The glass doors closed behind her with a soft hiss, sealing away the sound of stunned silence that still hung over Counter 12. Doctor. Danielle Brooks stepped into the open concourse of Terminal 4, where the world kept moving as if nothing monumental had just taken place. Families hurried toward boarding gates, suitcases rolled. Voices murmured in a dozen languages, yet, in the middle of it all, Danielle moved through the space like calm fire. The rhythm of her heels against the marble floor was unhurried, deliberate. Each step carried the weight of authority reclaimed, not flaunted. Behind her, cameras still flashed through the glass. The onlookers at Counter 12 were frozen in the moment she had left them. The aftermath of humiliation turned revelation. But ahead of her, the air was clearer. Jason Morales followed a few steps behind, his tablet still glowing with live updates. "Dr. Brooks," he called softly. "Headquarters just sent confirmation. The broadcast feed has been viewed by over 200,000 employees in the first 10 minutes. Danielle did not slow. "Then they are awake," she said. He hesitated. "The board wants to know if you wish to return to the press office for debrief." "No," she replied. "This does not end behind closed doors. They watched me be dismissed in public. They will watch me be believed in public." Her voice carried quiet authority, the kind that needed no amplification. As she walked past gate E5, a man stood up from his seat, removing his headphones. "Excuse me," he said hesitantly. Are you the woman from the broadcast?" Danielle paused. "That depends on what you saw," she answered. The man's expression softened. "I saw someone make them listen." "Oh." A few nearby passengers looked up from their phones. One woman in a pilot's uniform straightened her shoulders. A flight attendant lowered her voice and whispered to a colleague, "That's her, the one from Counter 12. Danielle gave the man a nod, polite but brief. "Then yes, that was me." He smiled faintly. "Thank you for that." She inclined her head. "Do not thank me, just remember." She walked on. The sound of her footsteps seemed to echo louder now, not because the terminal had changed, but because perception had. Every person she passed looked at her differently, some with admiration, others with guilt, and a few with quiet awe. As she neared the end of the concourse, a group of Meridian Airways employees stepped aside instinctively, creating space for her to pass. One of them, a young black woman in uniform, stood frozen for a moment, eyes wide. She whispered, almost afraid to speak, "Dr. Brooks." Danielle stopped and turned toward her. The young woman's name tag read, Danica Lewis, Customer Experience Associate. Her hands fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve, but her voice, though trembling, carried conviction. "I saw everything. What you did, I have never seen anyone stand so still and still change everything around them." Danielle looked at her for a long second, then said softly, "You do not always have to shout to be heard. Sometimes stillness is the loudest thing in the room." Danica nodded, eyes glistening. "I did not know we were allowed to be like that." Danielle's gaze warmed. "You were always allowed. You were just taught to forget." The young woman smiled through tears, her voice breaking slightly. "You gave us something today." Danielle's reply was simple. "Now do something with it." The moment hung between them, quiet, strong, unforgettable. Then Danielle turned and continued toward the executive terminal. Behind her, Danica straightened her posture, her shoulders squaring for the first time that shift. Jason caught up to Danielle, his voice lower now. "Dr. Brooks, the media teams have started requesting interviews. They want statements about what happened, quotes about discrimination, about corporate responsibility." Danielle shook her head. "They want headlines. I want culture to change. Let them wait." He nodded, understanding. "There is another update." The London partners responded. "They are asking to renegotiate terms." "Tell them the answer is no," Danielle said. "You cannot negotiate respect retroactively." Jason hesitated. "They might threaten legal action." She stopped walking, her expression unreadable. "Then they can sue for what they lost, a chance to stand beside dignity. There is no court in the world that will side against that." He nodded again, awe quietly returning. As they neared the private elevator that led to the executive lounge, a familiar sound broke through the air, the voice of the intercom. It was not the usual automated announcement this time, but a live human voice. "This is Maya Turner speaking from Meridian Ventures headquarters. To all Meridian staff at JFK, effective immediately, Counter 12 is closed for full review. The incident has been recorded as a case study in corporate ethics and leadership accountability. Dr. Danielle Brooks retains full authority." Passengers stopped mid-stride. Conversations ended mid-sentence. The announcement was brief, but it echoed through every corner of the terminal, like history being notarized in real time. Jason exhaled. "They are making it official." Danielle nodded once. "Good. Let them document it. The world forgets too easily. Sometimes you have to carve the lesson into the marble. They reached the elevator. The glass doors slid open silently, revealing the private corridor beyond. Danielle stepped inside, but before the doors closed, she looked back one last time at the bustling terminal. Through the sea of faces, she saw Melissa standing near counter 12, surrounded by investigators. Melissa's posture was small, but her expression was not anger, it was realization. Roger Hale was beside her, head lowered. Samuel Drake stood a few feet away, no longer giving orders, his authority stripped to its bones. Danielle watched them for a heartbeat. There was no hatred in her eyes, no gloating, only understanding. She whispered softly, almost like a prayer. Change never begins with the willing, it begins with the shaken. The elevator doors closed, sealing the moment with a quiet sigh. Inside, the air was still. Jason looked at her with admiration mixed with exhaustion. Dr. Brooks, what will you do now? Danielle leaned against the cool glass wall and exhaled slowly. I will go home. I will rest. And then I will write the policy that ensures this never happens again. Jason smiled faintly. You think they will listen this time? Her answer was quiet but certain. They will have to, because silence has witnesses now. The elevator rose smoothly, the floor lights reflecting upward like an ascension. As it carried them away, the faint murmur of the terminal below lingered the sound of a story that had already stopped being rumor and started becoming law. The elevator ascended with a low, constant hum, its glass walls revealing the terminal below a sea of motion, voices, and consequence. Danielle Brooks stood motionless, her reflection overlapping with the movement beneath her. For the first time since the ordeal began, her heartbeat slowed to something steady, measured, familiar. The crisis was over, but the weight of what it meant was just beginning to settle. Jason Morales stood beside her, still holding the tablet against his chest like a shield. The screen glowed faintly, displaying a stream of corporate alerts. He looked nervous, even though the danger had passed. Dr. Brooks, he said softly, the London office has sent 3 more requests for an emergency meeting. They are panicking. Danielle did not look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on the moving panorama of the terminal below. Let them panic, she said calmly. Panic is what arrogance feels like when it realizes it is no longer safe. Jason hesitated before speaking again. You know they will spin this, right? The press will try to make it about the deal, not the discrimination. Danielle finally turned her head toward him. That is what they always do. They rewrite the moment so it feels smaller, easier to swallow. But this time, they cannot. The footage is everywhere. The silence has already told the story. The elevator slowed, the soft chime signaling their arrival at the executive lounge level. The doors opened to reveal a wide corridor lined with glass and steel, modern but cold, the kind of place built to project power, not comfort. Maya Turner was waiting. She was tall, elegant, and composed, her dark suit immaculate. The chief operations officer of Meridian Ventures did not need to raise her voice. Her presence spoke for her. Dr. Brooks, she said, walking forward with purpose. You just dismantled a billion-dollar partnership in 20 minutes. Danielle met her gaze evenly. No, she replied. I dismantled a culture that protected humiliation and called it professionalism. Maya studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slightly. And you did it live, in front of the entire company. They needed to see it, Danielle said. No memo, no statement would have changed them. They had to see disbelief crumble in real time. Jason remained by the elevator, unsure if he should speak or vanish. Maya glanced at him, then back at Danielle. The board wants a briefing in 30 minutes, she said. They are calling this event a catalyst. The chairman used that exact word. Danielle smiled faintly. Catalyst. That is what happens when you stop waiting for permission. Maya exhaled slowly, lowering her voice. You know what this means, do you not? You just became the face of reform not just for Meridian, but for every corporation that has built comfort on compliance. I did not ask for that, Danielle said quietly. Maya's tone softened. I know, but the truth never waits for volunteers. The words hung between them, quiet and heavy. Jason finally spoke. Dr. Brooks, if I may, I just wanted to say thank you. I do not know if you noticed, but when you first walked up to the counter, everyone froze. You were calm, but the room changed. It felt like gravity shifted. Danielle turned to him, her expression gentle. That was not gravity, Jason. That was the sound of perception correcting itself. He smiled awkwardly, his admiration evident. I hope someday I can handle myself the way you did. You can, she said. Just remember, control is not the absence of emotion. It is the mastery of when to release it. Maya looked down at her tablet as a new notification appeared. They are preparing the official statement for global release, she said. Would you like to approve it before it goes out? Danielle extended a hand. Show me. Maya handed her the device. The statement was concise, polished, the language safe and sterile. Meridian Ventures reaffirms its commitment to equality, diversity, and integrity in all corporate practices. The incident at JFK Terminal 4 will serve as a learning opportunity for the company to strengthen its culture of inclusion. Danielle read it once, then again, her lips pressed into a thin line. Erase it, she said. Maya frowned. Erase it? Yes, Danielle repeated. It sounds like a press strategy, not accountability. Replace it with something human. What do you want it to say? Maya asked. Danielle looked up, her eyes steady. Say this. We failed. We watched injustice unfold under our logo and did nothing until the person we dismissed reminded us who we were supposed to be. We will not forget it. Maya blinked, surprised by the simplicity and power of it. That is, raw. It should be, Danielle said. Apologies should sting. Otherwise, they are rehearsals. Maya nodded slowly, typing the revision herself. It will go out immediately. Danielle turned back toward the large window overlooking the runway. Outside, planes taxied in the bright morning light. She watched one ascend, its silver body slicing through the clouds. For a moment, her reflection in the glass merged with the rising aircraft, two silhouettes rising through turbulence into clarity. Behind her, Jason checked his watch. Dr. Brooks, your car is waiting downstairs. She nodded. Good. Let us go. Maya stepped forward. Before you leave, she said, you should know the board voted unanimously to make the Brooks Protocol a permanent fixture. Every Meridian Airways employee will undergo behavioral audit training starting next quarter. Your name will be on every manual. Danielle turned to her, surprise flickering across her composed exterior. My name? Yes, Maya said. They insisted. You changed how this company defines professionalism. Danielle was silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, names are easy to print. Change is harder to live. Maya smiled faintly. Then let us live it. Danielle nodded once, a small but resolute gesture. As she walked toward the exit, the soft hum of the terminal returned, but it felt different now, not as noise, but as rhythm. People were moving again, but something had shifted. Conversations paused when they saw her. A few clapped quietly. One child pointed and whispered, that is the lady who made the rules change. Danielle allowed herself one small smile. Good, she murmured. Let the children know what justice looks like. And as she stepped into the sunlight outside, her reflection in the glass doors followed her not as shadow, but as witness. The morning light flared bright across the tarmac, and in that light, it was clear. The world had not gone back to normal. It had gone forward. The air outside the terminal carried a crisp sharpness, the kind that belonged only to autumn mornings in New York, clean, cool, and alive with motion. Traffic murmured beyond the glass doors, taxis sliding past like yellow currents in a river of steel. The sky was an endless blue canvas, but for Dr. Danielle Brooks, the horizon felt newly drawn. Her driver stood waiting beside a black sedan, the kind of understated car chosen for discretion, not display. He straightened when he saw her, opening the back door. Good morning, Dr. Brooks, he said respectfully. I saw the broadcast. The world saw it. Danielle paused before entering. Then perhaps the world finally saw what it refused to hear, she replied quietly. Jason Morales was beside her, still carrying the company tablet like it contained the heartbeat of what had just happened. His expression was torn between awe and disbelief. Dr. Brooks, he said softly, I have never seen anything like that. You did not even raise your voice. Danielle turned her gaze toward the horizon where airplanes rose one by one, cutting through clouds like promises. Power does not need volume, she said. It needs clarity. Jason nodded, still absorbing everything. What happens now? Now, she said, we make the noise matter. They climbed into the car. The door shut with a quiet finality, sealing them from the sound of the terminal behind them, the chaos, the whispers, the beginnings of change. Inside the car, silence settled for a moment. The driver started the engine, merging into the slow-moving line of airport traffic. The hum of the road beneath the tires became its own rhythm. Danielle exhaled deeply, her hand resting against the cool leather of the seat. "How many people were watching when the broadcast ended?" she asked. Jason glanced at the screen. As of 10 minutes ago, over 600,000 live viewers. Social media clips are already spreading. News outlets have started calling it the Counter 12 Reckoning. Danielle's brow lifted slightly, but her tone remained composed. "They always need a title," she murmured, as if a name could contain what really happened. Jason smiled faintly. "It will reach millions by noon. The conversation has already started. People are talking about systemic bias, about corporate culture, about silence. You changed something today." Danielle looked out the window. The city skyline glimmered in the distance, sharp against the rising Sunday. "Change is not what I want," she said. "Continuation is. Change fades. Continuation becomes culture." Jason turned the screen toward her. "The board has released the official statement you edited. It is everywhere already." Danielle took the tablet, reading the words she had written just an hour before. "We failed. We watched injustice unfold under our logo and did nothing until the person we dismissed reminded us who we were supposed to be. We will not forget it." She nodded once. "That is the only apology worth hearing, one that admits the wound before it sells the cure." The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Dr. Brooks," he said cautiously, "if I may, people like me, we see things like this happen all the time. The world moves on in a day. What makes this one different?" Danielle met his eyes in the mirror. "Because this one was recorded by the people who caused it. That means they cannot pretend it was imagination." The driver nodded slowly, his eyes soft with understanding. "That makes sense, ma'am." Jason looked at the driver, then back at Danielle. "They are already calling you the woman who made accountability fashionable." A small laugh escaped her lips, not joy, but irony. "Fashionable? Accountability should never be a trend. It should be instinct." The car turned onto the highway, the city's towers rising closer, reflecting morning light in fractured brilliance. Danielle's gaze drifted to the skyline. "For too long," she said quietly, "we have taught people that composure means silence, that dignity means endurance. But endurance without recognition is slow erasure. Today was not just about me. It was about the millions who have endured in quiet, waiting for their existence to be believed." Jason listened intently, his hands folded over the tablet. "You think they will listen now?" She paused before answering. "They are listening now because they are afraid. The real question is whether they will keep listening when the fear fades." Her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. Incoming call, Meridian Ventures boardroom. She ignored it, letting the call pass unanswered. Jason blinked. "You are not taking it?" Danielle's eyes stayed on the horizon. "They have heard my voice for hours. Now they need to hear their own silence." The driver merged into the express lane, speeding past the airport perimeter. The city stretched wider now, the morning sun spilling across bridges and glass towers. Jason spoke again, almost in a whisper. "Dr. Brooks, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Were you ever scared? Back there at the counter?" Danielle was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Yes, but not of them. I was scared of becoming what they expected, angry, loud, uncomposed. I knew that the moment I raised my voice, they would stop hearing the words and start hearing the stereotype. So I stayed still. Stillness is not surrender. It is strategy." Jason nodded slowly. "That is why you said stillness is the loudest thing in the room." She smiled faintly. "Exactly." He stared at her, thoughtful. "It is strange. You did not punish them. You did not shout. But they looked smaller by the end, not because you destroyed them, but because they finally saw you clearly." Danielle turned back to the window, the faint reflection of her face merging with the city skyline. "Truth always changes size depending on who holds it," she said softly. "When they held it, it was heavy with arrogance. When I held it, it became light because I no longer carried their disbelief." The car slowed as they approached the Meridian Ventures headquarters, an elegant glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. The morning light poured down its surface like liquid gold. Reporters were already gathering near the entrance. Cameras flashed in anticipation. Jason looked nervous. "They are waiting for you." Danielle took a deep breath. "Good. Let them." The driver stopped at the curb. A security guard opened her door. The sudden noise of the city honking cars, clicking cameras, murmuring voices rushed in. Danielle stepped out slowly, her posture tall, her expression serene. The reporters shouted questions, microphones stretched forward. Dr. Brooks, did you cancel the deal because of discrimination? Do you plan to sue Meridian Airways? Are you the new face of corporate justice? Danielle stopped at the edge of the steps, turned slightly toward the crowd, and said in a voice steady enough to cut through the noise, "No, I am not the face of justice. I am the proof that silence does not equal weakness." The crowd went still for a heartbeat just long enough for truth to settle before the noise began again. Danielle continued walking up the steps, her reflection multiplying across the glass doors ahead. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a quiet smile, not of triumph, but of relief. The war was not over, but the world had finally seen the first real battle. And this time, she was not alone. The lobby of Meridian Ventures glimmered with morning light, refracted through walls of glass that stretched 40 floors above the city. The marble beneath Danielle Brooks's heels reflected every step she took, like a mirror that had been waiting years to show her this exact moment. Employees turned as she passed, not out of curiosity, but reverence. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The kind of hush that follows history lingered in the air. Some tried to speak but could only nod, their faces showing a mixture of admiration and the quiet guilt of recognition. Maya Turner was waiting near the security checkpoint. She held a tablet in one hand, a coffee in the other. "The boardroom is ready," she said softly. "And so are the cameras. They want to make this official." Danielle glanced at her. "Official?" Maya nodded. "They are naming the new internal ethics directive after you, the Brooks Protocol." Danielle smiled faintly, a small exhale of disbelief. "They love to name things after the mess they created." Maya allowed herself a laugh. "Yes, but at least this time, the name means something. They entered the elevator together. The doors slid shut, sealing them in quiet. The hum of the rising car felt almost like the pulse of the building itself, steady, alive, awakening. When the doors opened, the boardroom stretched out before them. Long table, panoramic skyline, a dozen executives standing as she entered. No one sat until she reached the head of the table. "Dr. Brooks," said Chairman Ellis, voice formal, rehearsed. "On behalf of Meridian Ventures, we extend our deepest apologies and our gratitude. You have forced us to confront who we had become." Danielle met his eyes. "You did not become that overnight," she said calmly. "You built it over years, one silent approval at a time." The words struck like a quiet verdict. Ellis nodded, chastened. "Then allow us to rebuild something better, with your guidance." Maya gestured to the large screen behind them. A slide appeared, displaying the company's new mission statement. Integrity, inclusion, accountability. Underneath, smaller words glowed in white text. Inspired by Dr. Danielle Brooks, Chief Compliance Officer, Executive Oversight. Jason, who had followed silently into the room, could not hide his pride. Danielle looked at the screen for a moment, then back at the faces around her. "This cannot just be a promise," she said. "Promises are polite, lies if you never measure them." She stepped closer to the table. "The Brooks Protocol will not be words on paper. It will be lived through every hiring decision, every customer interaction, every board meeting where someone chooses silence over courage. Because silence, as you have seen, is never neutral." The room remained silent, not fearful, but moved. Danielle's tone softened. "You do not owe me applause. You owe the next generation a world that does not require them to fight for respect." When she finished, even the city outside seemed to pause. The skyline gleamed behind her, and in that light, Danielle Brooks looked less like an executive and more like what she had always been, proof that dignity, once awakened, could rewrite everything. The applause that followed was quiet, not performative, not forced, just the sound of sincerity breaking through a wall that had been built from years of avoidance. It was not the applause of victory, but of awakening. Danielle Brooks did not bow, did not smile. She simply stood still, letting the moment breathe. Chairman Ellis cleared his throat and gestured toward the large display screen that dominated the front of the boardroom. "Dr. Brooks," he said, "we have already begun implementing the Brooks Protocol. Every division head is required to attend bias reconstruction training starting this quarter. We have suspended 6 regional executives pending review of their conduct reports. And, he hesitated, then added, we would like you to lead the ethics division permanently. The room waited for her response. Cameras from internal communications teams captured the moment, but Danielle ignored them completely. She kept her focus on the faces around the table, faces that for years had spoken of progress while practicing exclusion, faces that finally looked ready to listen. Her voice, when it came, was calm. Leadership is not a title, she said. It is a test. You do not pass it when people follow you. You pass it when they change because of you. Ellis nodded slowly. Then consider this our first step toward that change. Danielle moved to the center of the room. Behind her, the city stretched like a sea of glass and light, 1,000 windows reflecting the dawn of something new. When I designed the original compliance model for Meridian Ventures, she began, it was not about punishment. It was about prevention, making sure we built a culture that protected fairness instead of defending ego. But somewhere along the way, those policies became decoration, words to comfort investors, not people. That is what must end now. Her tone grew firmer, sharper, but still controlled. Every company loves to talk about diversity. Few are willing to confront what that word costs. It is not inclusion if it only exists on paper. It is not equity if it depends on apology. And it is not progress if the people most affected are still required to prove their pain before you believe them. Several executives shifted in their seats, the sting of truth cutting deep. Danielle continued, her pacing deliberate. You have seen what disbelief looks like. You saw it at Counter 12. You saw how a system designed for convenience became a weapon of humiliation. But you also saw what happens when someone refuses to play along. You saw silence become power. Her words landed like stones in still water, each one creating ripples that could not be undone. Jason, seated near the back, looked at her with quiet awe. He had heard speeches before, polished, rehearsed, designed to impress. But this was not that. This was lived experience turned into doctrine. Danielle turned toward him, then toward the camera recording the meeting. Every person watching this, whether you wear a suit, a headset, or a name tag, must understand one thing. Dignity is not a privilege distributed by power. It is a right that power cannot take away. The Brooks Protocol is not just a rule book. It is a mirror. And every time you face it, you will see who you really are. The room was utterly still. Chairman Ellis leaned forward. You will have full control of the ethics division. Whatever you need, staff, budget, authority, it is yours. Danielle regarded him quietly. Then I will start by removing hierarchy from accountability. No more reviews that skip executives. No more training that exempts managers. Bias does not stop at entry level. It sits in boardrooms too. Ellis's expression softened with respect. Understood. Maya Turner smiled faintly from her seat. Dr. Brooks, she said, we will have to issue a formal company statement to the public this afternoon. The press will not wait. They are already asking for your comments. Danielle nodded once. Then give them this. She walked toward the window, the sunlight painting her in gold. Her reflection merged with the city skyline, woman and world, both transparent and strong. Tell them, Meridian Ventures is not proud of what happened. Tell them we are ashamed. Tell them that shame, when faced, becomes discipline. And tell them that justice does not end with me. It begins with whoever refuses to stay silent next. Maya's eyes glistened. That will be the quote that defines you. No, Danielle said quietly. It will be the quote that frees me. The silence that followed was reverent. One of the older executives, a man who had spent 3 decades in the company, finally spoke. Dr. Brooks, he said slowly, if I am being honest, I used to think these things were exaggerated, the talk about bias, about treatment. But after watching what happened at the airport, I saw it. I saw how we failed to see. Danielle looked at him. Seeing is the beginning, she said gently. Believing is the change. He nodded, eyes lowered. Then I am ready to change. Her tone softened. Good. Then begin by listening not to me, but to the people you have not heard before. Jason glanced at his tablet again. Dr. Brooks, social media engagement just passed 2 million. The phrase Counter 12 is trending globally. A faint smile touched Danielle's lips. Let it trend, she said. For once, let truth go viral. She turned toward the board. When the world looks at Meridian now, they will not see perfection. They will see transparency. And transparency, once seen, cannot be unseen. Chairman Ellis rose from his seat. "You have our commitment, Dr. Brooks." Danielle inclined her head. "Do not give me commitment, Mr. Chairman. Give me consistency. Commitment is loud. Consistency is quiet. But quiet changes more than noise ever will." "Oh." The words lingered in the air long after she finished speaking. Outside, the city moved as it always did, taxis rushing, horns echoing, sunlight reflecting off towers. But inside that boardroom, something had shifted forever. For the first time in the company's long, polished history, the reflection staring back at it was no longer corporate. It was human. And in that reflection stood a black woman who had been underestimated, doubted, dismissed, and who had, without shouting, rewritten the definition of power. When the meeting ended, the executives lingered in silence. No one rushed to the door. It was as if leaving too quickly would break the gravity of what had just occurred. Danielle Brooks gathered her papers calmly, the simple act echoing louder than any speech. Jason Morales followed her into the hallway. His voice was quiet, reverent. "Dr. Brooks, you changed them." Danielle shook her head slightly. "I reminded them." He looked puzzled. "Reminded them of what?" "That leadership is not inherited," she said. "It is earned every time you choose fairness over comfort." They reached the large glass atrium. Morning sunlight poured across the marble floor, spilling gold around them. Employees were watching from the balconies above dozens of faces, some curious, some inspired, some ashamed. Danielle stopped in the center of the light and looked upward. "Let them see me," she said softly. "Let them remember that we do not rise because they finally see our worth. We rise because we never stopped believing in it ourselves." Jason stood beside her, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in his chest. Around them, the quiet built into something profound, the sound of understanding replacing applause. Danielle turned toward the exit. "Come, Jason," she said gently. "We have work to do. Justice is not an event, it is maintenance." As she walked forward, sunlight followed her steps like an oath, tracing the outline of a woman who had turned humiliation into policy, disbelief into doctrine, and silence into legacy. And somewhere in the hum of the building above, the world began to move differently, a little slower, a little fairer, a little more awake. Outside, the city breathed in rhythm with her steps. The morning had grown brighter, the skyline washed in sunlight that seemed to chase away the last traces of the night before. "Doctor." Danielle Brooks paused at the edge of the plaza, the glass tower of Meridian Ventures rising behind her, no longer a monument of power, but a mirror of change. Cars passed. People stared. Some whispered her name. Others simply watched in silence, sensing that they were witnessing the quiet beginning of a new standard. Danielle looked up at the sky where a plane cut cleanly through the clouds, its trail dissolving into light. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass facade beside her, calm, unbent, unafraid. She whispered to herself, "Let this be the last time disbelief gets to speak before truth does." Then she turned, walking toward the waiting car. No fanfare, no cameras, no performance, only purpose. And as the door closed behind her, the sound was final yet full of promise. Because this was not an ending. It was a beginning written in dignity, sealed in stillness, and carried forward by a woman who had proven that sometimes justice does not roar. Sometimes it simply stands tall and is seen.